My uncle was a pedo and tried to kidnap me, so my dad took matters into his own hands. So, this was told to me by my dad over a drink recently. He'd gotten a little drunk and ended up admitting it to me. He said it's been too long now and he'd paid the consequences, so there was nothing to come back to him. Uncle Mark was my favorite uncle when I was a child. He always invited me around to show me his airsoft gun collection, hide-and-seek parties with my friends, and even took us to the beach. He would always come with sweets for us and act like one of us, another child who just wanted to have fun. But then, the day I was meant to be going around because we were going for a ride to this amazing place, my dad was happy and cheerful for the entire day. He was going on about how much he loved the fact that his brother wanted to be in his children's lives, until he got a call. I was in my room, packing my stuff, when I heard the most blood-curdling scream from my dad. He was screaming and raging. I heard him rip open our front door and slam it back shut with enough force to make the picture next to it fall off the wall. I didn't see my dad for a long while after that, and he never told me why until we had this talk, but that shall be explained at the end. Mom had a lot of money saved up from a minor lottery win, so we were okay. And she always smiled and said, "Daddy is just away for a little while because he was looking after me and my siblings," whenever I asked where he was. Uncle Mark didn't come around either during this time, but we did see him in town a couple times. Funnily enough, he ran away the moment my mom saw me waving at him. 9 months later, Dad came home, and I excitedly ran and hugged him. He hugged me right on the back with a good squeeze. We had a party to celebrate his coming home. We had pizza, cake, and all the usual stuff. I was just happy my dad was home, though. A week or so later, Dad sat me down with the other children and explained that Uncle Mark wouldn't be coming around anymore. When asked why, he just said Uncle Mark was a bad person and that if he ever tried to talk to us, we were to ignore him and come find one of them. We all agreed because my dad always knew best. One day, a year or so later, I'm 9 at this point, I'm coming out of school to wait for my parents to pick me up. My other siblings were either at secondary school or too young for school, so it was just me. I see Uncle Mark standing there with a big grin. I get nervous when he comes up to me, saying he's here to take me for a ride. I tell him I'm not supposed to talk to him and that he's a bad person, like my dad said. Uncle Mark got this scary look on his face for a second, then told me it was all good and his parents had changed their minds and made him take my hand. That's when I saw my dad just appear. My dad punched Uncle Mark right in the face, and little old me saw blood fly as Uncle Mark went sprawling. I didn't see much after that except Uncle Mark running away with my dad chasing him. He came back after a little while, sighed, and gave me a hug. He told my mom to take me home and that he'd see us later. I don't know why, but I knew there and then it would be a long time before I ever saw my dad again. And I was right. 5 years. 5 years after my dad was gone, my mom eventually admitted to us that he was in prison for protecting us, and we all guessed he'd done something to Uncle Mark. And he had. It turns out Uncle Mark liked kids. He liked them a lot. And that day, I was meant to go to his house. My aunt had called my dad and told him she'd found some pictures under her in Mark's bed of children, and she was scared of what to do because Mark was a big man and it was later revealed he had used her. So she was scared to call the police on him, and my dad had gone into a rage and stormed over to his house. He'd smashed in the door to find Uncle Mark screaming at my aunt as she waved the pictures around in hysterics. My dad had beaten Uncle Mark within an inch of his life, Uncle Mark screaming he'd make him pay as the police had arrested my dad. The Messiah thing was that by the time my dad explained why he had done it, Mark managed to get the pictures, burn them, and scare his wife into saying nothing, so there was no evidence. My dad was sent down for assault, but I made sure my other uncle and older cousins were around to protect us in case Mark came back. But, oh no, Mark waited until my dad thought we were safe. And then, according to my dad, they had come to kidnap me from the school right under their noses. Who would stop him? People didn't believe my dad when he explained that Mark was a predator. They thought he was just excusing himself for attacking him. After all, the police hadn't found anything, and his wife said my dad was a liar, whereas my dad was the big angry guy with a few assaults under his belt already. So all they saw was my nice uncle here to pick me up. He had gotten away from my dad at the school. My dad had tripped, and it gave him the chance to run. But my dad knew where he would go. Knew Uncle Mark would run home to hide and more than likely destroy any evidence he had gotten since destroying the last lot. He also knew the police would be on his tail for the attack on the school, so he didn't have long. The difference was, though, that my dad had his car while Uncle Mark was on foot. So, he drove over and demanded to know if my aunt was going to lie again, after what Uncle Mark had just tried to pull. Now, I don't like my aunt much after what she pulled the first time, but I think in that moment she really realized what a monster my uncle was. He was willing to do this to her nephew just for pathetic revenge for being called out as a predator. She said she wouldn't stop my dad or save Mark this time. My dad ordered her to get all the evidence she could as he waited for Mark to appear. She came back down with pictures. There are lots of pictures. He then told her to go, wait an hour, and then call the police. He was ending this. And as Uncle Mark appeared, my dad, who had been waiting behind the wall of his garden, slammed him through the door of his house, and then proceeded to beat him to unalive in his doorway. Apparently, towards the end, he couldn't see the floor through the blood. My dad was arrested for murder and did so without resistance, only saying he wished they'd done his job for him. But when it was revealed that Uncle Mark was indeed a predator who had attempted to kidnap me and that they had to face the fact that they had allowed a predator to run free, he was instead charged with manslaughter, his lawyer stating my father had gone into a protective rage and had only intended to render him harmless. Funnily enough, no one argued in defense of the predator for my dad getting the murder charges. He said he didn't regret it, but that he wished he had done something else purely so that he didn't miss out on so much of my life. I told him I was forever going to be proud of him for that and that I loved him. I was a bit shocked. I wasn't told just what Uncle Mark was for so long. But my dad asked if it would have made it any better to be told as a child what he really was or now as a man who can handle the truth, and he was right. As a child, I would not have been able to mentally handle it. I'm barely able to handle it now. TLDR, my uncle was a predator. Dad found out and beat the stuffing out of him. Uncle tried to kidnap me in revenge and ended up unalive. Relevant comments. In response to a deleted comment. OP. Apologies. Yes, Mark was a pedo. His wife found pictures of kids, but my dad didn't tell me just what they were doing, only that they proved he was a pedo. I honestly wouldn't have wanted to know what the pictures showed if he had tried to show me anyway. The Mockingbird. Out of curiosity, are your parents still married? And how did your mom react to the overall situation? Either way, your dad's a bloody hero. OP. Mom's a firecracker too. She's the type to crack you with a wooden spoon if you cause trouble. I talked to her recently about it, and apparently it was only by my dad's asking not to that she didn't throttle my aunt. Now more jobs. How did your dad know to go to school when your uncle showed up? OP. It wasn't that he knew to show up, like I stated. He and my mom were coming to pick me up in his car. Usually they take a little while as they wrangle my younger siblings. So I think the plan was to take me as soon as I left the gates. Show me the trees. Another question. Did the authorities ever track down Mark's victims from those photos? OP. I didn't ask, but you know what? I'm going to. I don't know if they were just photos of children or if they were being used by him, but if they were, yeah, I want to. I'll update you all if I do, okay? Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.